Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people? Like your words didn't matter, your presence didn't count, and no one really saw you? That quiet sting of being overlooked or dismissed, it's one of the most painful things a person can experience. Not because it breaks your body, but because it crushes your spirit. Disrespect doesn't always show up in shouts or insults. Sometimes it hides in silence, in a smirk, in the way someone cuts you off mid-sentence, or how they roll their eyes when you speak. It's subtle, but it sinks deep. And the worst part, you start questioning yourself. Is it me? Am I too sensitive? Should I just let it go? You try to stay calm, you try to be the bigger person, but inside, a storm is building. Because being disrespected doesn't just bruise your ego, it bruises your identity. It whispers lies into your mind that you're not important, that your voice doesn't deserve space, that you're not enough. But none of that is true. Here's the truth. Most people won't tell you. Everyone faces disrespect at some point. It's a part of life. But the people who rise, the ones who earn respect in return, aren't the ones who shout back the loudest. They're the ones who choose a different path. A path of power, not reaction. A path of self-worth, not self-doubt. See, people will only treat you the way you allow. That's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also the most freeing truth you'll ever learn. Because if your response can shape how others treat you, then you hold the power. You get to decide where the line is. You get to decide who stays in your life, who gets your energy and who doesn't. But that kind of strength doesn't come from rage. It doesn't come from proving yourself over and over again. It comes from within, from knowing who you are, from realizing that someone's opinion of you does not define you. There's a moment in life when you have to stop shrinking to fit places where you are not respected. You weren't born to play small. You weren't created to beg for approval. You're here to stand tall, speak with truth, and walk in purpose. And yes, some people will be threatened by that. They'll test your patience. They'll try to poke holes in your confidence. But that's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their fear. What would your life look like if you stopped chasing respect from the wrong people? If you stopped wasting energy trying to win over those who are committed to misunderstanding you? Imagine the peace, imagine the strength. Imagine walking into a room not needing validation because you already know your value. That's the reward waiting for you when you learn how to handle disrespect with grace and unshakable confidence. Respect doesn't begin with others. It begins with you, with how you talk to yourself, how you show up when no one's watching, how you carry yourself when someone tries to tear you down. Every time you let someone cross a line without consequence, you quietly teach them that it's okay. But every time you choose dignity over drama, every time you walk away instead of breaking down, you build a new standard. You become the example. So if you've been hurt, overlooked, or underestimated, don't let it break you. Let it build you. Use it as fuel, because people may doubt your words, but they can never ignore your growth. Stay silent if you must. Stay focused, but never stay small. You don't have to fight to prove you matter. Just rise. Your strength, your presence, your quiet power, that's more than enough. And if you stick around till the end, you'll learn how to reclaim your peace, rebuild your confidence, and walk with the kind of self-respect that makes people pause when you enter the room. Not because you asked for it, but because you demanded it without saying a word. The moment you begin to respect yourself, the world starts to shift around you. Not because people suddenly become better, but because you start seeing them more clearly. You stop making excuses for their behavior. You stop twisting yourself to earn their approval. You begin to understand a powerful truth. Disrespect is never about you. It's a reflection of who they are, not who you are. Some people disrespect you not because you're weak, but because they sense your strength, and it unsettles them. They try to diminish you because they feel small in your presence. They interrupt you, ignore your opinions, mock your choices. Not because you're wrong, but because your confidence reminds them of everything they haven't become. Their words are weapons, thrown not from a place of truth, but from fear, insecurity, and ego. And if you're not careful, you start to believe them. You internalize their projections. You shrink your voice. You play small. You stay silent when you should speak up. But here's the thing. What they say doesn't define you. What you accept does. That's where everything changes. When you stop trying to be liked by everyone and start demanding to be respected by the right ones, your life transforms. Because respect is not something you chase. It's something you command. Not through force, but through presence, through clarity, through conviction. People learn how to treat you by watching how you treat yourself. Every time you allow someone to dismiss your worth without consequence, you give them permission to do it again. It starts with awareness. Pay attention to how people react when you set boundaries. Watch how they behave when you say no. when you stand firm, when you honor your own needs. Some will back away, some will get angry, some will try to guilt you. That's when you know you're doing it right. Because people who benefit from your silence will always resent your strength. You weren't born to be passive. You weren't made to absorb other people's disrespect and call it maturity. Real maturity is knowing when to stay calm and when to walk away. It's choosing not to fight every battle, but never surrendering your dignity. You don't have to explain your standards to anyone who's committed to ignoring them. Let your growth speak louder than your defense. When someone disrespects you, it's not a test of your value. It's a test of your boundaries. You can't control their behavior, but you can control your response. That's where your power lives. In the pause, in the decision, in the choice to act with intention instead of impulse. Don't let their immaturity drag you down to their level. Stay rooted, stay still. Let them spin in circles while you move forward in silence. The most dangerous person is the one who knows their worth and doesn't need to prove it. They walk differently. They speak differently. They make people think twice before crossing the line. Not because they threaten anyone, but because they don't tolerate nonsense. They don't beg. They don't explain. They just elevate. And that's what you're becoming. So stop wondering what you did wrong. Stop blaming yourself for someone else's inability to see your value. If they can't recognize your worth, that's their limitation, not yours. You're not here to fix them. You're here to protect your peace and keep building yourself. There will always be people who try to tear you down, but if you stand tall long enough, even the loudest critics go silent. Respect yourself enough to walk away from conversations that drain you, from relationships that belittle you, from situations that make you question your worth. You don't owe loyalty to anyone who treats you like an option. You don't owe explanation to those who twist your words. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself power. You owe yourself the kind of life where disrespect has no seat at the table. The moment you stop accepting less, you start attracting more clarity, more confidence, more genuine connection. And that's not arrogance, that's alignment. That's what happens when you finally decide that you are no longer available for anything that insults your soul. If you're tired of being disrespected, remember this: you don't rise by fighting every battle. You rise by knowing which ones to walk away from, and doing it without fear, without apology, and without looking back. And if that strength doesn't come easy yet, stay with it. Because the more you choose yourself, the more powerful you become. Keep rising, keep protecting your worth. Because the world may not always give you respect freely, but once you fully own who you are, they won't have a choice. Once you recognize your worth, you start seeing things differently. You stop chasing conversations that go nowhere. You stop arguing to be understood by people who have already decided not to listen. You stop offering explanations to those who are only waiting to twist your words. That clarity is everything. Because now you're not reacting. You're choosing where your energy goes, choosing who gets access, choosing how you show up. The truth is, you don't need to announce your worth. You just need to embody it. When you do, the right people will respect it and the wrong people will fall away. That's not loss, that's alignment. Disrespect doesn't always need to be confronted. Sometimes it just needs to be removed. Quietly, permanently, without permission and without warning. Because not every battle deserves your presence. Some just deserve your absence. The more you explain yourself to people who don't value you, the more you erode your own power. You dilute your voice just to be heard by those who were never really listening. That's not communication, that's self-betrayal. And every time you do it, you lose a little more of yourself to people who wouldn't even notice if you disappeared. But when you stop trying to be understood by those who don't care to understand, you reclaim something priceless: your time, your peace, and your voice. There's strength in silence. There's confidence in not needing to prove yourself. The most powerful people in the world don't waste energy convincing others. They act, they move, they build, and the world adjusts. You don't have to match anyone's disrespect with noise. Match it with success, with distance, with silence so loud it echoes in their own insecurity. That's the kind of presence they never forget. When people see that they can't shake your spirit, they start to question their own. You show them something they weren't prepared for: unbothered strength. Not because you don't feel anything, but because you've learned how to master what you feel. That's power, emotional discipline. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not everyone deserves your explanation. It's easy to confuse reaction with strength, but real strength is quiet. It's measured, it's strategic. You don't win by shouting, you win by choosing when to speak and when to walk away. Every time you respond to someone's disrespect with composure, you teach them something. You teach them that you don't need their validation to feel whole. You don't need their acceptance to feel worthy. You're not desperate for their approval. You've already approved of yourself. You are not here to play games with people who mistake your kindness for weakness. You're not here to entertain disrespect disguised as just being honest. You are here to protect your energy, to build a life rooted in purpose, and to rise beyond the reach of petty minds. That requires clarity. That requires boundaries. And most of all, that requires the courage to stop explaining yourself to people who never intended to understand you. Respect begins the moment you stop apologizing for taking up space. The moment you realize that being soft doesn't mean you have to be stepped on. The moment you decide that peace is more valuable than being liked. You don't need to prove you're good enough. You already are. You don't need to argue about your worth. You simply need to live like you believe in it. Let them think what they want. Let them assume. Let them talk. Their version of you isn't your responsibility. Your job is to show up every day with quiet confidence and unshakable purpose, to speak when it matters, to stay silent when it doesn't, and to never shrink yourself to fit into places you've outgrown. Stop explaining, stop chasing, stop defending your value. You've done enough of that. Now it's time to act, to move, to rise, because your power doesn't live in their opinion, it lives in your decision. The decision to honor yourself, the decision to protect your peace, the decision to walk away from anyone who treats you like you're ordinary. When you stop explaining yourself to people who don't respect you, you open the door to a life that does. You start attracting those who match your energy, who respect your silence, who see your strength without needing proof. And in that space, you finally realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. Keep choosing yourself, not out of arrogance, but out of self-love. Not to punish them, but to protect you. Because nothing speaks louder than the silence of someone who finally understands their worth and refuses to waste one more breath proving it. When you finally stop explaining yourself, something powerful happens. You begin to hear yourself. Not the noise of judgment, not the echoes of rejection, but your own voice, clear and strong, the voice that tells you what you need, the one that reminds you who you are. That voice gets drowned out when you're constantly trying to be understood by people who never cared to understand you. But when the noise fades and the space around you clears, that voice rises. And when you hear it, you can never go back. You begin to realize that your value was never supposed to be proven. It was meant to be known, first by you. That's why disrespect cuts so deep. Not because it's true, but because it touches the part of you that still wants permission to believe in yourself. The part that's still waiting for someone else to say you're enough. But you don't need that permission anymore. You never did. You just needed to remember that your worth doesn't need confirmation. It needs commitment. Commitment to yourself, to your peace, to your growth. And yes, some people will be uncomfortable when you choose that. When you choose not to engage in the drama. When you refuse to shrink just to make them feel bigger. When you walk away instead of argue. Don't let that bother you. Let it free you. Because their discomfort is not your responsibility. It's their reaction to losing control over you. And that's a sign you're finally taking your power back. The people who once dismissed you will begin to notice the shift. They may not say it. They may pretend it doesn't matter, but they'll feel it. They'll feel the weight of your absence, the clarity of your silence, and the confidence of your boundaries. And the ones who truly belong in your life will rise to meet you at that level. They'll recognize your strength not as a threat, but as a standard. Because the way you let people treat you isn't just about them. It teaches the world how to love you. And love starts with self-respect. You can't expect others to value what you constantly compromise. If you let disrespect slide, it doesn't stay small, it grows. It grows into patterns, into habits, into emotional exhaustion. Until one day, you wake up and realize you've built your life around people who never saw you clearly. That's why boundaries aren't selfish. They're survival. They're a declaration of what you will and will not allow. They protect your energy, your time, your dignity, and they send a message: I respect myself too much to stay in spaces that don't. It takes courage to say enough, to say, I won't let you speak to me that way, to say, this isn't okay. But that courage is what separates those who repeat the cycle from those who break it. And once you break it, everything changes. You no longer move from fear, you move from clarity. You choose who deserves your energy. You guard your peace like it's sacred, because it is. Let people underestimate you. Let them think you're weak because you don't react. Let them misjudge your silence. Just don't let them have your power. Don't let their behavior make you question your worth. You've come too far to let small minds dim your light. Rise so high that their opinions become irrelevant, so focused on your path that distractions lose their grip on you. And when they wonder why you're different, when they question your distance, you won't need to explain. You'll already know the truth, They were never meant to walk with you into the next chapter. They were a lesson, not a loss, a mirror, not a reflection. You saw what you needed to see, and you chose better. That's growth, that's power, that's respect. So let them talk, let them wonder, let them gossip. You have nothing to prove. The only thing you owe anyone is the best version of yourself, and that version doesn't beg for respect. It commands it. Not with noise, but with presence. Not with anger, but with strength. Not with explanation, but with silence that speaks volumes. This is your time to level up, to stand firm, to walk away from anything that forces you to question your value. Because every time you stay in a space that disrespects you, you teach your heart that it doesn't deserve more. But when you leave, when you choose yourself, when you raise your standards, you teach your soul to rise, and that's when you become unstoppable. The more you grow, the more silence becomes your response. Not because you're weak, but because you've realized not every situation deserves your energy. You're no longer fighting to be seen. You're no longer chasing validation. You've discovered something far greater. Peace. And once you taste peace, chaos feels like poison. You stop explaining, not out of pride, but out of clarity. You understand now that explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you is the fastest way to lose yourself. Respect is not about demanding attention. It's about commanding it without saying a word. And you do that by how you carry yourself, by what you allow, by what you walk away from. You've seen enough to know that some people will only treat you right when it benefits them. But the moment you ask for consistency, the moment you ask for respect, they pull away. Let them. That distance is protection, not rejection. Their absence is making room for presence, your own. When you refuse to tolerate disrespect, you break a cycle that has trapped generations. The need to be accepted, the fear of being alone, the habit of shrinking for the comfort of others. You shatter it. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with radical self-respect. That decision alone is a revolution, because people who are grounded in their worth can't be manipulated. They can't be baited. They can't be guilt-tripped back into places they've outgrown. And that kind of inner power is unshakable. You start to see that boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They're bridges that teach others how to meet you with respect. They're not about control. They're about clarity. You no longer say yes out of guilt. You no longer stay silent just to keep the peace, because you've realized that peace bought with self-betrayal is just quiet chaos. It always catches up to you. The resentment builds, the exhaustion sets in, until one day you wake up drained and don't even recognize who you've become. But not anymore. Now you're awake, you're aware, and that awareness is everything. You see the patterns, you feel the shifts, and you're no longer afraid to protect your energy. That protection isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's how you create space for your growth. It's how you make room for respect to enter your life, not as a request, but as a requirement. Some people will test you just to see how much you'll take. They'll cross small lines, waiting to see if you'll flinch, waiting to see if you'll speak. And every time you stay silent, they get bolder. Disrespect doesn't always arrive as a slap. It creeps in as a whisper, a subtle comment, a passive dig, a missed acknowledgement. You feel it, and now you're done ignoring it. You don't need to fight them. You just need to stand so firm in who you are that their disrespect can no longer reach you. They may call it distance. They may call it attitude. Let them call it what they want, because they don't get to define what you call respect. They don't get to label your boundaries as ego. That's not your burden to carry. Let people misunderstand you. Let them mislabel you. It means nothing when you're deeply aligned with who you are. Their confusion is not your crisis. It's their consequence for losing access to someone who once gave them far too much. The most powerful thing you can do is continue walking in purpose while others try to pull you into petty. Don't look back. Don't explain. Don't dilute your presence just to make others comfortable. You didn't come this far to play small. You didn't grow this much just to be triggered by the same tactics. You are not who you used to be. You've evolved. And with evolution comes elevation. And not everyone is built for those heights. Keep showing up for yourself. Keep honoring your voice. Keep defending your peace, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's unfamiliar. Because every time you choose yourself, you rebuild the foundation of your life. Stronger, wiser, clearer. You teach your soul that it's safe now. Safe to rise, safe to speak, safe to walk away. You become your own anchor. And when you're anchored in self-respect, no storm can pull you under. This isn't about revenge. It's not about proving anyone wrong. It's about remembering your truth, returning to your power, refusing to shrink, and rising with such inner conviction that even the silence around you commands attention. You don't need loud responses. You just need quiet strength. The kind of strength that says, I know who I am, and I refuse to be anything less. That's the kind of respect no one can take from you. When you stand in your truth, the world begins to shift. Not because it changes instantly, but because you stop bending for what no longer fits. You stop shrinking to be digestible. You stop adjusting yourself to earn a place in rooms that were never designed to hold your worth. You begin to understand that respect is not a gift you wait for, it's a standard you set. And when you set it firmly, consistently, unapologetically, the energy around you changes. People either rise to meet you or fall away. And either outcome is a blessing. Too often we've been taught that being liked is more important than being respected, that being agreeable is more valuable than being real. So we bite our tongues. We hide our brilliance. We soften our voice. But the truth is, being liked is temporary, fragile, and dependent on others. Being respected is timeless, and it begins with how you treat yourself. When you stop tolerating what insults your soul, you send a message not just to others, but to yourself. I matter. My voice matters. My peace matters. And this shift isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's internal. It's quiet. But it's undeniable. You stop entertaining conversations that drain you. You stop chasing people who don't show up. You stop justifying your boundaries to those who benefit from your lack of them. That's when your power becomes real. That's when your presence becomes felt even in your absence. Because you're no longer begging to be seen. You're focused on becoming someone who sees clearly your path, your value, your future. The need to be liked can keep you small. It can chain you to toxic cycles disguised as loyalty. It can convince you to overextend, overexplain, overgive, all while receiving nothing but silence or criticism in return. But when you let go of that need, when you choose truth over approval, you step into freedom. You realize that the right people will never make you beg for respect, and the wrong ones will never give it, no matter how much you sacrifice. You're not here to convince anyone of your worth. You're not here to negotiate your value with people who don't know how to treat you. You're here to protect your light, to grow in your purpose, to rise without apology. And that means making peace with not being understood by everyone. You're not for everyone, and that's your power, not your weakness. Because the ones meant for your journey will see your strength and meet it with honor, not resistance. Let go of trying to fix relationships that only survive when you abandon yourself. Let go of trying to be easy to deal with at the expense of your truth. Let go of trying to change minds that were never open to your voice. That energy is sacred. Save it for what builds you, for what inspires you, for what reflects the same respect you give so freely. Because when you give everything and still feel empty, that's not love, that's self-neglect. And you weren't born to live that way. You weren't born to carry the weight of others' insecurities. You weren't born to be anyone's emotional punching bag, peacekeeper, or project. You were born to be whole, to stand tall, to move through life with clarity, integrity, and grace. And grace does not mean tolerance of disrespect. Grace means knowing when to forgive and when to walk away. Walking away doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you bitter. It makes you brave. Brave enough to choose yourself, brave enough to break cycles, brave enough to say, I deserve better, and actually believe it. That belief changes everything. It gives you the strength to hold the line when others push it, to honor your standards when it's easier to lower them, to trust that letting go is not loss, but expansion. Your peace is not up for negotiation. Your value is not up for debate. When someone shows you who they are, believe it. And when they show you how little they respect your boundaries, respond with action, not explanation. Because the more you explain, the more you try to justify your pain, the more power you give away. Hold it. Keep it. Let your decisions speak for you. Let your silence become your strength. You were never meant to shrink for anyone. You were meant to evolve, to rise, to walk in rooms and change the atmosphere. Not because you demand respect, but because you carry it within you. That kind of presence is built in solitude, in self-honoring, in standing firm when it's easier to fold. And when you reach that level of self-respect, nothing and no one can take it from you. So let this be the season you choose yourself without guilt. Let this be the moment you stop tolerating what you once excused. Let this be the chapter where you rise not with noise but with conviction. Because real power isn't in proving others wrong. It's in proving yourself right. Right to love yourself deeply. Right to protect your peace fiercely. Right to never settle for anything less than what mirrors the strength you fought so hard to build. Every time you choose to honor yourself, you are rewriting the script that life handed you. You are breaking away from the noise that told you to stay quiet, be agreeable, stay small. You are no longer available for disrespect, not because you hate anyone, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. That shift is more than personal growth. It's a revolution. A quiet, powerful revolution that takes place in the deepest part of your spirit where you realize, I no longer chase peace outside of me because I've built it within. Disrespect doesn't always come in obvious forms. Sometimes it's subtle, a laugh when you speak your truth, an eye roll when you express your boundary, a delay in showing up, a refusal to acknowledge your presence. And the most dangerous part is that if you're not anchored in self-awareness, you'll convince yourself that these small dismissals are harmless. But they're not. They chip away at your confidence. They blur the line between what's acceptable and what's abuse. They train you to expect less, to settle, to stay quiet. But now you see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You feel it in your gut, that discomfort when someone crosses the line and expects you to stay calm. That pressure to keep the peace even when you're breaking inside. That invisible weight of being everyone's comfort while no one asks if you're okay. But you're done carrying that. You're done performing strength while being overlooked. You're done smiling through discomfort just to avoid confrontation. Because confrontation isn't chaos, it's clarity. And clarity is power. The people who truly respect you will never require you to abandon yourself. They will never guilt you for having boundaries. They will never call you too much for needing space or too sensitive for expressing hurt. And when someone does, they're not reflecting your worth. They're revealing their own lack of it. You can't fix that. You're not responsible for teaching grown people how to treat others with decency, but you are responsible for how long you allow yourself to stay in spaces that shrink you. Every time you make excuses for disrespect, you reinforce the idea that it's acceptable, and it's not even once. Because when you allow it once, it becomes a pattern. And patterns become identity. They become the story you tell yourself about what you deserve. But that story is yours to rewrite. You are not too broken to walk away. You are not too late to rebuild. You are not too far gone to demand better. All it takes is one decision to no longer settle, one choice to finally rise. Rising doesn't mean cutting everyone off. It means rising above the need to be validated by those who refuse to see your value. It means walking away with grace, not bitterness. Not because you don't care, but because you've started caring more for yourself. It's not revenge, it's realignment. You don't have to yell, you don't have to explain, you just need to act. That's the loudest statement you can ever make. Action speaks in frequencies words will never reach. The truth is, not everyone is meant to walk with you. And not everyone who started with you is designed to finish with you. Some people only connect with the version of you that tolerates being disrespected. They only feel comfortable around the version of you that overgives, over-apologizes, and overperforms. The moment you grow out of that, they feel threatened. Not because you've changed, but because they can no longer control the narrative. Let them go. Let them misunderstand. Let them talk. Because when you rise, your silence becomes the loudest answer of all. And this isn't about ego. It's about energy, protecting it, honoring it, investing it in places that nurture you, because your energy is your currency, and you're done spending it on people who don't value it. You're done offering discounts just to be accepted. The full price of your presence is now non-negotiable. And if someone can't afford it, they were never meant to experience it. That is not arrogance, it's awareness. The kind that only comes from experience, healing, and deep inner work. You don't have to become cold to be strong, you just have to become clear. Clear on what you deserve, clear on what you will no longer entertain, clear on who you are when no one is watching. That kind of clarity becomes your armor. It shields you from manipulation, it protects you from desperation. It guards your soul from being molded by anyone else's expectations. And that's where true peace is born. Not in being untouched by disrespect, but in being unshakable in the face of it. So when people treat you like you're ordinary, remind them who you are by how you move, not by what you say. Your distance, your standards, your silence, they speak volumes. You don't need to beg for respect when you've become someone who embodies it. Let your evolution be your explanation. Let your growth be your response. Let your glow be the answer to every question they never bothered to ask. Because the most powerful version of you doesn't argue, doesn't chase, doesn't beg. The most powerful version of you simply walks in purpose, with eyes forward and heart intact, no longer distracted by who doesn't respect you, too focused on becoming someone you respect fully, deeply, and without condition. That's the goal. That's the reward. That's the victory. The moment you start respecting yourself is the moment your life begins to align. Things that once drained you lose their grip. People who once belittled you fade into the background. Environments that once stifled you no longer feel like home. That's because respect isn't something you wait to receive from others. It's something you decide to embody, first within, then outward. And once that decision is made, everything changes. There's nothing more powerful than a person who no longer needs external validation. When your sense of worth is rooted in your own truth, not in how others treat you, you become untouchable in the most grounded way. You stop asking, why don't they respect me? And instead begin to ask, why have I been allowing this? That shift is everything. It puts the power back in your hands. It turns confusion into clarity. It turns victimhood into ownership. Disrespect thrives in environments where self-respect is lacking. Not because you're weak, but because you've been conditioned to prioritize peace with others over peace within yourself. But real peace requires honesty. It requires the courage to say this isn't okay, and the strength to walk away from what doesn't change. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable, because growth never happens inside the comfort zone of people-pleasing. Growth begins where your boundaries are honored, not questioned. Some people will call you selfish when you start honoring yourself. Let them. They've mistaken your silence for submission for too long. They've gotten comfortable with your compliance. They've depended on your inability to say no. But that era is over. You're not here to carry the weight of other people's expectations. You're not here to shrink yourself for the convenience of others. You're here to expand, to fill the space you were always meant to take up. It's okay to lose people when you find yourself. It's okay to disappoint others when you finally stop disappointing yourself. Not everyone will clap for your growth. Not everyone will celebrate your strength. And that's not your burden to carry. Your only job is to stay true to the version of you that no longer tolerates half-love, vague respect, or one-sided effort. That version of you doesn't ask for permission to exist fully. It simply exists, boldly and without apology. The truth is, some people were never meant to understand your journey. They were only meant to trigger the part of you that needed to heal. Their disrespect wasn't your fault, but your response to it is your responsibility. And when you take that responsibility seriously, you start building a life that doesn't depend on the approval of those who've never tried to understand you. That's how you rise, not with resentment, but with resolve. You rise by choosing silence over arguments that go nowhere. You rise by valuing your energy enough to stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You rise by creating distance, not to punish, but to protect. Because your peace is sacred. Your time is sacred. Your spirit is sacred. And when you stop handing that over to people who've shown you they don't value it, you start creating space for everything you truly deserve. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect. Conversations that uplift, not tear down. Environments where your presence is appreciated, not tolerated. And most importantly, you deserve to feel safe in your own skin, free from the constant burden of needing to prove your worth. That kind of safety doesn't come from others. It comes from you. It comes from drawing a line and standing behind it. Not with arrogance, but with certainty. Because the most dangerous lie is the one that tells you to keep waiting. Waiting for them to change. Waiting for things to get better. Waiting for the right time to stand up for yourself. But you don't need to wait. You're already enough. You're already worthy. And the longer you wait, the more time you give away to people who never deserved it in the first place, time you could spend healing, growing, rising. There is power in your no, power in your silence, power in your ability to walk away without bitterness, without drama, without explanation. That is maturity, that is strength, that is evolution. And not everyone will understand it. Let them wonder, let them gossip, let them watch from a distance while you become someone they can no longer reach. Not because you're above them, but because you've simply outgrown the level where they chose to remain. This isn't about hate. This is about clarity, about finally seeing things for what they are, about choosing your well-being over someone else's comfort, about being the kind of person who commands respect not by force but by presence. Because when your energy shifts, your environment must shift too. And if it doesn't, you move on. Not to escape, but to evolve. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that stays small so they can feel big. You don't owe anyone your silence to keep the peace they refuse to contribute to. You owe yourself everything you've been giving away. Your time, your energy, your love, your respect. Give it back to yourself first. Because the way you treat yourself teaches others how to treat you. And when you fully embrace that truth, no one will ever be able to disrespect you without consequences again. Respect is not just something you receive, it's something you reflect. And that reflection starts with your standards. The boundaries you draw, the behavior you tolerate, the energy you accept, they all form the silent message you send to the world about how you expect to be treated. If people keep crossing the line, it's time to stop redrawing it and start enforcing it. Because every time you bend your standards to accommodate someone's disrespect, You're not being kind, you're betraying yourself. It's not about being rigid, it's about being rooted. Rooted in the truth of who you are, rooted in the value you bring, rooted in the knowing that you don't have to overextend yourself to be worthy. You don't have to tolerate passive-aggressive remarks, emotional manipulation, or constant dismissals to keep the peace. Real peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of respect, and anything less than that isn't peace at all. It's a quiet war with your soul. The world responds to the way you carry yourself. Speak with conviction, not to prove a point, but to honor your truth. Move with purpose, not to impress others, but to align with your values. Walk into every room knowing that your presence is enough, because when you start believing that, others will too. You don't have to fight for attention. You don't have to chase validation. You only need to stand firm in your worth and watch how the wrong people fall away and the right ones step forward. Letting go of those who don't respect you is not an act of bitterness. It's an act of self-love. It's reclaiming the time and energy you used to spend explaining yourself, fixing their behavior, or waiting for them to care. It's realizing that you were never too much. They were simply too unwilling. And that realization is both painful and freeing. Painful because it shatters the illusion. Freeing because it finally sets you on the path back to yourself. You don't need closure from people who refuse to be honest. You don't need approval from those who only show up when it benefits them. You need to believe that your value is not up for debate, not negotiable, not dependent on someone's opinion of you. The most dangerous prison is the one built from needing to be liked. But freedom begins when you decide you'd rather be alone in your truth than surrounded by people who don't see you. And that's not loneliness, that's liberation. Because when you're no longer tied to being understood by everyone, you gain the power to be at peace with yourself. When you stop trying to make everyone comfortable, you finally get to be comfortable in your own skin. That's where your energy shifts. That's where your life changes. Not when you control others, but when you master yourself. When you become so rooted in your self-respect that anything that doesn't match it naturally falls away. The mind will try to convince you that setting boundaries will make you lose people. And it might. But it will never make you lose the right ones. The right people will meet you at your level. They won't guilt you for protecting your peace. They won't shame you for requiring clarity. They won't abandon you when you finally stop abandoning yourself. Because the ones who respect you won't need to be reminded how. Every time you stay silent when you should speak, every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you excuse poor treatment to avoid being judged, you teach yourself that your needs are less important. And the more you do it, the more disconnected you become from your own power. But power doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits for you to stop dimming. It waits for you to stop shrinking. It waits for you to choose yourself, fully and unapologetically. You were not made to be passive. You were made to be powerful, not in domination, but in dignity. And being so whole within that disrespect can't find a home around you. In being so connected to your values that compromise becomes impossible. In being so honest with yourself that anything false can no longer survive in your life. That is where true self-respect lives, not in being aggressive, but in being anchored. Respecting yourself isn't a single decision, it's a daily practice. It's in how you speak to yourself when you fail. It's in what you allow when no one's watching. It's in the standards you uphold, even when it would be easier to lower them. Because every choice is a vote for the kind of life you want. And when you start casting those votes for your highest self, everything begins to align. So don't beg for respect. Don't chase it. Don't try to convince anyone of your worth. Embody it. Walk in it, speak from it, and watch how the world responds. Not because you demanded it, but because you became someone who no longer settles for anything less. That's when the shift happens. That's when the power returns. Not in their hands, but in yours, where it always belonged.